Brexit talks between Prime Minister Theresa May and the main opposition Labour Party have collapsed without reaching a deal, and it follows 6 weeks of negotiations.
Mrs May and Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn were attempting to find a compromise between their parties to try and reach an agreement on an exit deal for the UK. But in a letter to Downing Street today, Mr Corbyn said the talks had gone as far as they can and blamed the increasing weakness and instability of the government.
And for the latest on this, let's go over to Natalie Powell in London right now. Natalie, let's take a look at this. Is all hope that the parties can come together now gone? Because, Mrs May's Brexit bill was already on shaky grounds. And so, has this actually sounded the death knell for it, though?
Well, I think if there is hope left, of course, any hope is fairly small slithers of hope at this stage. That seems to be the forecast here in the UK. Remember, of course, that recently we've had local elections here in Britain, and we've seen both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party not fare particularly well in those local elections. Before this vote takes place, we'll also have the European Parliament elections, which the UK is obviously having to take part in, which originally it wasn't going to had Brexit taken place on the 29th of March. And again, in these elections, it is predicted that both the Conservatives and the Labour Party are not going to do so well. Other parties that are either pro-Remain or pro-Brexit could well see some seats gained there. So, as a result of that, we may see MPs having their minds concentrated perhaps a little bit more, and perhaps a little bit more eager to try to get a withdrawal bill through, because it's very clear that in the UK, the public opinion is that either they want to remain or they want to leave, but essentially the MPs are not doing what they set out to do. So that could well concentrate some minds there. It's also possible as well that we know that UK Prime Minister Theresa May has promised to set out a timeline of her departure. That could well see some hardline Brexiteers come back into the fold and vote in favour of her withdrawal agreement, simply because they realise that potentially a hardline Brexiteer could then come in as Prime Minister, and then that would affect the next stages of Brexit, being the future relationship with the European Union. And there's also some speculation that what Downing Street is hoping to achieve here is that perhaps the Labour Party may actually abstain in this vote in order to try and influence the further readings of the vote when it comes to amendments. And of course, if the Labour Party then abstain, there is less opposition in the first place to it. But as I've said, it does seem that they are very small slithers of hope at this stage.
Well, Natalie, Labour says that some of the uncertainty over the Tory party leadership is part of why they can't find common ground. Does this mean that Mrs May will have to go sooner than she perhaps wants to?
Well, what's happened recently is not only has Mrs May said that she will step down once her bill gets voted through, but actually she said that she will now signal her timeline to step down, regardless of whether this vote goes through or not. Of course, when it comes to the Labour Party, well, that means that they could simply make a deal with Theresa May, and the next minute another leader could come in and completely tear up that compromise agreement. So that's why they have not been particularly happy, and that's why we've seen these talks now completely come to an end as a result of that. In terms of whether she is likely to resign any sooner, of course, well, we'll simply have to see what happens with this vote. There is some speculation that if her vote is rejected in Parliament in the early stages of June, then potentially she may well resign. However, if it is voted through, she may well set out that timetable for leaving, but that timetable could look like that she will stay on until the whole Brexit process, or certainly this first stage of Brexit, is completed. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there is even more pressure on her. There is already a lot of pressure on her to resign, but it does look like she is going to be in that seat until this vote takes place in early June, and then we'll just have to wait and see what she says in terms of her departure deadline and timeline that she is going to set out following this vote.
All right, many thanks for that update. Natalie Powell speaking to us from London.